Hello, hello. Are we live? Yep. Welcome back to the advent of syntran. Today is day 16. First of all, I have to pull my code because I fixed up some things on my laptop. Like I added a capacity check so that we don't just blindly overflow. I was watching another Twitch stream last night, and like as soon as I joined, people started talking about like, oh, I had to deal with this code where there were no checks for overflows. It was terrible. It was like, oh god, I literally just wrote some advent of code that does that. So then I had to fix it. Okay. So now there's a capacity overflow. Check. All it does is print something. I don't have an exit in syntran. That might be like the first thing that I work on after I'm done with advent of code. I need exit because exit is like the easiest type of error handling, and it would be helpful for cases like this at least. But that's day 15. Let's start day 16. Input downloader is working. So let me get out of day 15 over here too. And let's take a look at the puzzle prompt. I have looked at this ahead of time. Let me save that test input. So I should be able to echo that. There it is. We have a hall of mirrors. So there are empty spaces, there are mirrors, which are forward slashes and backslashes, and then there are splitters, which are pipes and dashes. So basically a beam of light enters at the top left corner and it moves to the right. Or maybe I'll call this to the east, because every day until now they said north, south, east, west, and now they're saying left, top, upward, downward, right? I think I'm going to stick with the map cardinal directions for consistency. So a beam of light enters here and it starts moving to the right, but when it hits a splitter at a right angle, it will split it. So this splitter will cause the beam of light to go up and down. This is the edge of the map, so there's nowhere for it to go up. So basically it just only goes down. It hits this splitter and it goes left and right. It goes left in by one space and then it hits the edge, but to the right it starts going this way. When it hits a splitter parallel, basically nothing happens. So it goes right through this splitter, and then it hits this mirror, and when it hits a slash mirror, it gets reflected in the direction that you would kind of expect. So when it hits a forward slash going to the right, it will get reflected upwards. Then when it hits a forward slash going up, it will get reflected to the right. But I'm pointing in the wrong direction for the camera, so what I mean is that way. And then it goes this way, it hits this backslash and then gets reflected down, and it continues like that, getting reflected and split. So eventually we end up with a state like this. This 2 means that there are actually beams of light that go in 2 different directions at this grid square. I don't think that's important for part 1. All we care about for part 1 is how many tiles have a beam of light passing through it. So here there are 2, but we really only care if there's more than 0. I have no idea what part 2 is going to be like. I have a feeling this might be a difficult day. But for part 1, I should be able to do this with... I think I'm planning to do a depth first search. You should be able to do a depth first or a breadth first search. But I think I'll do a depth first search and use a queue to keep track of all my beams of light. So the mirrors are not hard, but the splitters, every time I hit a splitter, I'm going to have to push like an extra beam of light onto a queue. And then I'll process the one split, and then I'll go back to the queue and process the other split later. Yeah, so they only care about whether there's a beam of light or not. They don't care about how many there are. Really a little bit nervous about what part 2 is going to be. But can't worry about that. Gotta do part 1 first. Okay, so we're echoing the input. I'm gonna load this into a matrix of characters. We had some code to do this in 2 previous days, maybe 3 previous days. I could copy and paste it, but I think I'll just write it again. This will be the size of the grid in the Y direction, or the north-south or up-down direction. And that will just be counting the lines of the file. And then the size in the other direction is just the number of characters in the first line. You know what? If I print like this, I shouldn't have to put in my own comma separator manually. I don't know why I just thought of this. Like if I pack them into an array, then print will automatically delimit them. Yeah, so there we go. Previously I was having issues where I would just print 1010 with no comma or space in between. This is an easier way to print stuff like that. Maybe. And then we can read the file one line at a time and save it. I need to pre-allocate a grid. And do I want this to be a global variable? I don't think so. I'm gonna need a stack. Did I say stack or queue? I want a stack to keep track of my depth first search. And for that, I would like to use a global variable. Just so I can work around syntran memory leaks. Ideally, it could just be a local variable that gets passed around the functions. But I know syntran will have memory leaks if I do that. This is going to be strings. And the size of the grid is nx by ny. So there's our grid. Let me double check that that's right. And we have a pipe there and a pipe there. Those look correct. Okay, so next I want a stack and a stack pointer, which are going to be global variables. You could use a queue, and if you used a first in, first out data structure like a queue, then you would end up doing a breadth first search, and that would be totally fine. I think either type of search should work for part 1. With a queue, you have to keep track of the beginning and the end of a queue. A stack is going to be one less global variable or one less member in a struct if you have structs in your language, because you only need to keep track of the end of a stack. The beginning of a stack is always 0. And this is going to keep track of where my beams get split, but I might just use it for like every tile that a beam of light is on. Yeah, and in my stack, I want to keep track of where the beam of light is and which direction it's heading. So this actually needs to be a 3 by something size stack. And stack cap is just going to be some hard-coded upper limit. So our maybe it's better to look at this. So where do we? Yeah, there's. You have to be careful about getting stuck in loops. So the beam goes down. Goes. Oh. Are there any loops in here? Yeah. Yeah, so right here we have a splitter. The split sends us to the right. Then we bounce up, we bounce right, we bounce down. Then there's another splitter. So one of those splits sends us off to the left. And then we hit this splitter, and one of those splits sends us up. And now we're back to this splitter. So this is basically a little loop. And you have to be careful not to get to not get stuck in this loop and just follow the loop around forever. So if at any point we get to a tile where there's a beam of light heading in the same direction as the beam of light that we're currently processing, we can stop because we're potentially in a loop, or at the very least we're somewhere where we've already been in the same state, so we don't need to do any more work. If you get to a tile with a beam of light headed in a different direction, you do need to process that because that could send you somewhere else that you haven't discovered yet. So my stack, it has to keep track of where every beam of light is, and it has to keep track of the direction. Yeah, the stack needs to do that, and then I need a separate grid, which also does that. Maybe. Because my stack, at the end of the search, my stack will be empty, and I won't have anything left in it because I've processed everything. But I need like a separate grid-like data structure which contains the same information. Because at the end, that's what I have to add up. So we have a stack, and then we're going to have like another grid array, but it's not. It's not going to be characters, it's going to be integers, and they're going to say which direction. Or, yeah, should it be integers or should it be booleans that tells me if light exists in a certain direction? I think it's easier if I do booleans. So I'm going to call this grid beams. Do they say beams in the puzzle? Anyway, it's going to start out as booleans. And it's going to be 4 by nx by ny, because at every tile, you could potentially have up to 4 beams of light going in each direction. And I need to copy and paste that from somewhere. Do they say? Yeah, they call these beams of light. So I've named that variable sufficiently. Where did I use this before? Day 10 and day 14. So I'm going to copy these direction global variables from day 14 and paste them right here. And I think I want to parameterize this. So now that this array can be a consistent size. It's not going to change, there are always going to be 4 directions, but I'll make that a variable just in case. There are no constants in this language. There's no concept of immutability versus mutability. Everything is mutable, but I name it with all caps so it looks like a constant. Potentially you could do the same thing for D, or for 2. That could be like the number of dimensions. This is a 2-dimensional problem. I think that comment is good enough. Okay. So I think those are all the data structures that I need. And they're global variables because I'm working around syntran memory leaks. That way I don't need to pass them to functions. If I even have functions, I might not. I don't know nx and ny yet. So this is problematic because nx and ny don't exist. So initially it's just going to be an empty rank 3 array. And then I have to allocate it somewhere else. It's already declared though, so I don't use let. I think that should run. Let me make sure that still runs. It doesn't. Stack cap needs let. There we go. Okay. So to start the search, we're going to push a beam of light at the top left corner headed to the east, or at the northwest corner headed to the east. So we're going to push it onto the stack, and I need a function to do that. So it will take needs the direction and the location. So for consistency, my array has the direction before the size, so I guess I should pass arguments in that same order. Maybe it makes sense with a location before the direction, but that's how that array is declared, so I'm going to do it like that. So the direction starts out east, and it's at 0, 0. Then I need to define this push function. also need a stack pointer. So this will point to the end of the stack. And my push function will increment that after it's done. So it will say stack stack 0 SPTR. That's going to be the direction. And the other two spots are location. So X and Y. And then it increments the stack pointer. So the next time we call this, it will set the next part of the stack. And I think I might as well set the grid beams in this same function. This is a void function. It doesn't return anything. There's no type over here. If I wanted to return a 32-bit integer, I would write it like that, but there's nothing there. So this is a void function. So we set the stack, and then I think I want to set the grid beams too. So grid beams dir x, y equals true. I think that's it. Will this run? Will the first push run without crashing? Right, I need types. So these arguments all have types, and they're just all I32. If I had unsigned integers, I would probably use them there, but I don't have unsigned integers in syntran. Also, I want to check if there's overflow. Okay, so that runs. And if I do this like 2,000 times, it's going to overflow. My stack cap was 1024. So actually, I could just do stack cap plus 1. And it actually crashes, but it does say stack cap overflow before it crashes. How do I have bounds checking? Did I accidentally build a debug executable? But I mean, it's not helpful bounds checking. It's giving me like line numbers in the interpreter, not line numbers in my syntran source code. Anyway, we don't actually want to do that. I just wanted to check that error handling. Top left from the left and moving to the right, so that's east. I'm going to say north, south, east, west, because that's what we did on all the other days until now. So now we need logic to actually traverse this space. While not beams empty. And I need to define beams empty. This is just going to tell me if the stack is empty or not. It should be a pretty simple function. And it's going to check if the stack pointer is greater than 0. Do I need brackets on one line? Do I need braces on one line functions? Let's... This is going to be an infinite loop. How is that not an infinite loop? Did I save this? Prints nothing. What is going on? So I printed it once, and then I never went into the loop. Oh. Yeah. It's the opposite condition of what I wanted. That's an infinite loop. There we go. I shouldn't need any of this. Okay. Maybe I want a counter so I can just break out of this loop after a few steps for debugging purposes. Okay, now we have a non-infinite loop. So what do I want to do? I want to get my current beam location. So these should be variables, first of all. I had some problems with deep copy. Are you using Python? I think I might have asked you about this before. Python, yeah, I remember doing some little thing in Python many years ago and being very confused about the existence of copy versus deep copy. I was like, what? It's not just always deep copy? At least in languages like C, they make the existence of pointers obvious. So if you want to have one thing that's just a reference to another thing, you have to intentionally do that by making a pointer. But in Python, they try to hide it from you by like not actually copying things when they think you don't want to, but then you have no idea what Python is doing. Anyway, I don't want to rant about Python. I'm sure it's a fine language. Pythonic problems. It's very Pythonic. So we start out in the top left, going to the east. And now, if we know the current beam location, we can find out what the next beam location is. So x will be plus equals ders, it's capital ders, 0 dir. Yeah, I also want to parameter. I also want to make that a variable. I'll do y first. So x and y will both get incremented depending on the current direction, and the initial direction is east. So this should do nothing. It should just take us 4 steps to the east, or 4 steps to the right. So x is increasing, y is staying the same, because I'm not actually handling the splitter yet. So the next thing to do is start to handle mirrors and splitters. Splitters will push extra beams onto the stack if we're hitting the splitter at a right angle. If we hit the splitter going parallel, nothing happens. And then mirrors will change the direction of the beam. What do they say? They don't really say what this means, and it doesn't matter for part 1, but this tile is energized where there is a mirror. But do we have 1 beam or do we have 2 beams here? Because it's going up and then it gets reflected to the right. So does that count as 1 beam or 2 beams? I don't know. It doesn't matter for part 1, but I'm worried that this is going to come up in part 2. Now, what are my conditions here? I think I want a temporary variable for the character at the current grid location. X, Y. So we should get a bunch of empty spaces, and we should get a splitter at one point. Okay, yeah, so we have a splitter. So we have a splitter at 1, 0. I guess maybe I should handle that case first. And yeah, maybe I don't want x, y, and dir to be variables like this, because I push them. But then when I enter this loop, I don't necessarily want to retain this stuff. I want to pop it off the stack. So I need a pop function. And I think it doesn't need any arguments. This will return a vector of integers. It's going to return the direction and the X location and the Y location all packed into one vector. Because I don't have structs, but I do have arrays, so I'm taking something that should be a struct and packing it into an array. I'm lucky they're all the same type. Yesterday I had to do this weird thing where I treated integers as strings, but today it's a little easier because they're all just integers to begin with. So this is stack 0 S pointer and stack, maybe I want these on separate lines. This might be a memory leak. We'll find out. Maybe I want to bring up Task Manager just so I can watch for that. Okay. So that happens, and then I need to decrement the stack pointer. Or do I want to decrement the stack pointer before? I think I have to decrement it before. And then I need to unpack the things from this vector. So, dir equals beam 0. And then X and Y. Okay, so this is good. We were doing 4 steps, but now we do 1 step and we stop because we push the top left beam onto the stack, then we pop it off and our stack is empty, so we're done. Now, at every step, if I have an empty space, I just want to push that onto the stack. You don't necessarily need to do it like this. You could just not push things unless you hit a splitter, because when you hit a splitter, you multiply the number of beams that you have, or you increase the number of beams that you have. So that's the only place you really need to push something onto the stack, but I'm just going to handle things consistently and push something onto the stack at every step, unless there's already a beam at that location. Then I don't need to push it. So first I'm just going to see if I can do that unconditionally. Going to push dir x, y, because we popped this x off of the stack and then we incremented it based on the direction that we're going. So this will push something different back onto the stack. And now we have 4 steps again, but we're still not handling the splitter. So this is not really what I want to do. But I know that my stack works now. I can push and pop and then push new things back onto it. I can't forget to do this at some point. So if, I guess I'll handle the splitter first, or the pipe splitter. If we're at a splitter and we're going east or west, because if we're going north-south on a pipe splitter, nothing happens. It just, the beam passes straight through. I also need bounds checking. So if x, because this is going to happen at the first pipe splitter. One of those splits is going to head off the map, and then I don't want to do anything for that. I don't have... what do they call this in C? There's like continue in C, or I could say like if X or Y is off the map, just continue, just skip to the next loop iteration. I don't have that, so I'm gonna do something funny to avoid having like a bunch of nested if statements. If 0 is less than or equal to X, so if X is inbounds and Y is inbounds, then C is the usual case. And by default, I'm going to make it some dummy value, which will represent being off the grid. For example, we never have the lowercase letter O in here, so I'm going to use O to represent being off the grid. So that will be initialized to O, and if it's inbounds, then we get the actual grid value. But if C equals O, then we're not going to do anything. We're not even going to push because it's off the grid and this beam is dead. Now this is an else if instead of just if. So if we hit a pipe splitter going east or west, we're going to have a beam going north and a beam going south at this location. So we're going to push north, and we're going to push another one because this adds an extra beam, and south. So I think that handles the splitter correctly. We still have to handle the dash splitter and the forward slash and backslash mirrors. I'm just going to assume that that worked. I'm not printing out the right things to verify that that worked. How did we get a dot? So I think I need to handle the dot next. Do I always start out on a dot? Okay, good thing I looked at this because the actual input, I start out on a backslash. The hardest thing is to figure out what order you want to do things in the main loop. So do I want to like update my direction, or do I want to pop something off the stack first, or increment X and Y? And I think I'm not doing these in the right order. Yeah, so if I start out on a mirror, this isn't right because my direction immediately changes. Maybe I don't need to do this here at all and just have it in an if statement because it's only going to happen if I'm on an empty space. So if we are on an empty space going in any direction, direction doesn't matter. Then I want to do this incrementation thing. And then I want to push. Okay, so I'm getting stuck on the pipe. But I need to make sure I count this, because for the final answer, like this tile is energized. The tile where the pipe is energized. So I don't want to get to the pipe and then immediately skip to the north and south of the pipe. I want to still mark the pipe as energized. So we're not going to push on the current position, we're going to push above and below the splitter. But there have to be bounds checks there. Because I have a bounds check here, but I don't know, maybe I could build the bounds check into push. I don't know. I think I'll do it here. So this energizes the current tile, and then the tile above and below will get energized inside the push function. Okay, so we have the initial 0, 0 tile, then we have a pipe, and then we start going down from the pipe. So that takes us from 0, 0 eventually to 1, 1. So that's where that is, and there's another dot, and then we go to 1, 2, so we're down there. And then I'm only doing 4 steps because I wanted to make sure I could get this somewhat right before I go too far. So maybe let's go up to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's go up to like 12 steps because that's where the next thing that I haven't handled yet happens. So if I go up to 12 steps, we'll get to a dash splitter, and I haven't handled that yet. Okay, so we get to a dash splitter, and then it's done because it doesn't push anything onto the stack. So it's going to be kind of like this splitter. Now we're going to do north or south. I probably need extra cases for if I run into a splitter in parallel. Maybe this could just become an else clause instead of an else if, where by default it just pushes the current location. I think that's the right way to do that, but I'm not ready for that yet. I want to handle the dash split in the actual splitting direction. So we'll mark the current one just like we did for the other splitter, and then now we need to check the X bounds. And this will push east. Lucky these are both 4 letters. This is so convenient. Like some cardinal directions have 5 letters in their name and some have 4 letters in their name. But we got lucky where the opposite directions just line up so that these commas are in a nice place. Anyway, this is going to be x plus or minus 1 and just y. We're not changing y. So that should handle the dash splitter, and then we should go a couple extra steps. We should go left and then hit the edge of the map, and then we should go right. And then this will be the next thing that I have to handle. Okay, so we got to 2,7, 1,7, 0,7, then we hit the edge of the map, and that's the end of that beam. Now this will be the real test. Am I handling multiple beams in parallel on my stack? Because my stack should just automatically handle that. When this beam gets to the edge of the map and dies, we should then process the split in the other direction from here. So that should take us to like 3,7. Yeah, so let's go a couple extra steps up to K14. One comma 7. Oh, these are the wrong directions. So that should be west and then east. Because like I stepped away from the splitter and then I went right back into the splitter. So I had those backwards. Okay, so yeah, it actually handles the other one first. It does 1,7, 2,7, 3,7. Then it hits this in parallel and it doesn't know what to do. So then we handle the other one in the other direction and it goes off the map and we're done. That's all the steps it was ready for. Do I just want to take this out yet? What happens if I just increase it? I think, yeah, we'll just end at the same spot because the stack is empty because I'm not handling the dash splitter in parallel yet. I don't know if I want to say parallel, because it's like, am I searching in parallel, or is the parallel refer to the beam direction? So parallel beam direction splitters. Maybe that's a little more clear. Okay, now we made it a few more steps, and I think we just went straight off the map in the right direction because I'm not handling the slashes yet. I think I can consolidate some of these. We could run into the forward slash from 4 different directions. We could go into it from going east or west or north or south. And then the same for the backslash. We could run into that for in 4 different directions. So that would be like a total of 8 cases for both slashes. But some of those will both send my beam to the north. So I think I can consolidate some of them. So what will send us to the north? So if we have a forward slash and we're going east, or if we hit a backslash going west for the camera, going west and we hit a backslash, that will also send us north. Oh, syntax highlighting. Oh, that got messed up. Do I have to just turn off syntax highlighting because of this? Because I think this is valid syntran. This will close the quote. This is annoying. No, there's no way to fix this by like tricking it into having the closing quote in a comma. Oh, there we go. Okay. This comment is here just to close what the Rust syntax highlighter thinks is still a string, but this is not part of the string. This is just a single character syntran string, and then the string ends. Because if you want to escape a quote in syntran, you just double the quotes. So if we hit the forward slash going east, that sends us north, and if we hit the backslash going west, that sends us north. So it's going to be kind of like this. We need a bounds check, and we need to set the current location. I think that's it. And was that? Yeah, so I think I should hit this, and then that should deflect me north. So instead of seeing 7, 8, we should see something going north and then run off the map or just end, break out of my loop because of my counter. I think that's right. So we hit the slash at 4, 7. The text editor says 8, 5 because it's 1-based indexing and it has them in the other order. So 8, 5 is really 4, 7. So we hit this at 4, 7, and then we start going north. So we hit this one at 4, 6, but I haven't handled this case yet, so it just keeps going north. So what are the next cases? So what will deflect us south? If we hit a forward slash going west, or if we hit a backslash going east, yeah, those would both deflect us south. So it's just the opposite directions as this case. So this will send us south. Oh man. My syntax highlighter is all messed up. Or not my syntax highlighter, but the Rust syntax highlighter. And it's going to be like this line, but not this line. So delete that. I think I need to refill my coffee before I test this, so I will be right back. All right, I'm back. I'm not actually going to get to this case yet, so there's no point testing that really. And then the other case, I need two more cases. So these handle deflections to the north and the south. Now I need to handle deflections to the east and the west. So let's do east. So if we hit a / going north, that will deflect us to the east. Or if we hit a / going south. So these will deflect us to the east. So that's like this line, but not this line. And then the last case, or the last pair of cases, it's just gonna have these swapped. So if we hit that going south, or if we hit this going north, it's basically the opposite directions as this. Then I don't want those. It's going to be like this line. And I think that's it. I have a little extra space here that doesn't really do anything for alignment. Is that everything? That might be it. Oh, I have to handle loops. My volume is really loud. All right. So if we get to a tile that we've already been before, heading in the same direction, then we don't do anything. So I'm gonna have like another no op early on in my, early on in my switch case. I don't have switch case in syntran, so I just have if, else, if, else, if. It's the same thing. You don't really need switch case in a language. All it saves you is from typing the left-hand side of the equals equals comparison. So I'm going to have early on in my if, else, if chain, I'm going to have something that says, if I've already been here going in the same direction, do nothing. So that I don't get into infinite loops. And I think I can take this out. So if I take this out right now, I should be in an infinite loop. Or it crashes, actually. That's interesting. Maybe one of my bounds checks is wrong. Where did we end up? 7, 8, which is really 9, 8. So we got here. We went to 7, 9, and then that should go off the map. Why did that overflow? Okay, I think there needs to be a bounds check here. Wasn't there? Yeah, I probably should have put my bounds check inside of push to begin with, but I just have them everywhere else instead. Is that really still crashing in the same way? And we got to 7, 9. And then we went off the map. Because there is no bounds checking in here, so I have to do the bounds checking before I call push. There's no stack capacity overflow. That shouldn't do anything. says pushing dot. It says pushing dot, and then it never says done. So it's definitely crashing here. But why? I have the bounds check. X less than NX, and less than or equal. Why did I do less than or equal? That's not what I wanted to type. Okay. There we go. And now we're in an infinite loop because we're not checking if we're already where we've been before. And eventually that should be a stack overflow. Yeah, so stack cap overflow, and then it just crashes. Did I need this bounds check? I think I do. Yeah, definitely need that. Okay. Now we're gonna get the stack overflow again. That's okay. We just have to handle infinite loops. Else if grid beams dir x y do nothing. We've already been here in this direction. It's important that if you have like two different beams going in different directions at the same tile, you have to traverse both of those. But if you're somewhere that you've already been before and you're going in the same direction as when you've been there, then you don't want to go back into that loop. Because I pushed, and then maybe I want to set this later. Maybe I don't want to set it here. Because we push and that sets it to true, and that says we've already been at the first spot. Well, no, we really haven't. And then it does nothing, and we exit the loop immediately. So if I handle it like that, so I set it to true for the splitters and the mirrors, but in the current spot, what did I copy? I should set it here too, I think. Will that work? Looks promising. We went through a whole bunch of steps. So how many tiles have we energized? Is that enough? I feel like that's not enough. Maybe there's a case that I forgot to handle. So the answer that we're expecting is 46. Let's see if we can count that number. It doesn't look like I went through 46 steps. I think I missed something. What if I just print K? Okay, that might be okay then. This didn't look like 50 something lines times 2 or times 3, because I'm printing like two or three lines of debug text per loop iteration. So we'll get back to some spots. So I'm expecting this to be a little bit higher than 44 or whatever the answer is. Now I have to like count up my Boolean array in a separate loop at the end. So, I'm about to type some very wet code. If grid beams 0, xy, or grid beams 1, xy, or 2 or 3. Basically, if there's a beam going in any direction, then I'm going to increment the sum. What is this, 44? 46. Really? I'm just off by 2? Oh, 46. I thought it was 44 for some reason. Cool. I think I'm ready for the real input. It's probably gonna crash. Something bad might happen. I might get a stack capacity overflow. I don't know if that hard-coded upper limit is big enough. We'll find out. Or it might just print a bunch of stuff for a really long time. That didn't take too long. And I think no stack capacity overflows. Maybe there are, but I just missed them because all it does is print. It doesn't actually stop. Cool, that's part 1. This doesn't sound hard. We just have to put that in a loop now. Put part 1 in a loop and find which starting position maximizes stuff. Like I already have the variables set up for that. So my initial push, I set the initial location. So all I need to do is put this in a loop where I try every possible starting location. And then there's going to be like a loop starting here. I think, if I've understood part 2 correctly. Yeah, this is not hard. At least that's my prediction. Let's turn off debugging, by which I mean turn off most of the prints. And then I will copy and paste part 1 to part 2. Don't really need K for anything anymore. Okay, now I'll copy and paste that to part 2. So this will become part 2. But for now, this will just run part 1 twice. Okay, takes a second. Are we gonna have to optimize this somehow? So this is 100, 110 by 110. Was that like 10,000? And change. So it's 12,000. Is it going to take me 12,000 seconds to check every one of these? Maybe. Yeah. I mean, 12,000 seconds isn't that long. Well, it's going to be 1.5 seconds times 12,000. So, yeah, 12,000 seconds is kind of long. I don't know. I have no problem running this overnight if that's what it takes for me to get this problem. Because like if I have to optimize it, I would try. But like if I can get it within a day without doing any optimization work, I'm just gonna do that. Like I need to save my energy for the next day of advent of code. So at every iteration, I'm going to have to reset grid beams. And I don't think I need to reset the stack, because the stack will be empty every time I begin. But I will need to reset grid beams. Let's go back to the test input. I just changed part 1. I did not want to edit part 1, so undo. Take this and move it down here so that I remember to reset it inside the loop. And then change to the test input. And I am in part 2 now. That's good. The question is, like, how much of this 1.5 second runtime is just loading the file? Also, this is part 1 and part 2, so it's really like 0.7 seconds for a single search. Okay. So do I want to have a single loop that does all of the searching? So how is my memory leak situation? If I go back to the real input and watch task manager here, that not even the slightest bump. So I'm not concerned about memory leaks yet. Maybe if I do a search of 12,000 that calls a function, that could cause a memory leak. Because like I could have a loop and then make this whole thing the body of a function, which gets like the number of energized tiles for a given starting point and starting direction. If I do that, would I have to pass any arguments to it? I think not. I think all the important stuff is global variables, and then maybe like the initial direction is all I would have to pass as an argument. So I think I can make this a function, and that's really the right way to do it. So let's get it cleaned up a little bit before I make a function. This has been tested. This is done. I like these braces for readability. Otherwise, it's hard to tell what's part of the condition and what's part of the body of the if clause. But I don't really need brackets here, or braces. That should still be the same. Okay, now I want to make this a function. So I'm going to have a function that counts the number of energized tiles for a given starting direction and starting location. Because from the corners, you could start from 2 different directions. But for the edges, you can only really start in 1 direction. Is that what they say? Can I start like going up from the west side? I think they said only the corners have multiple directions. If it starts in a corner. From and heading away from that edge. Okay, so like we don't have to worry about like starting here but going up, because you could potentially like hit a mirror and then get reflected into the rest of the grid, but we don't have to check those conditions. So I'm going to cut all of this into a function. These are all integers. Let's put some braces around everything. Hey, Extensor, thank you for the raid. What are you up to? Thanks. I've got a good feeling about this. It might be kind of slow. I don't know if I need to optimize anything or if I could just take my part 1 solution and then brute force it. Also doing AOC. I assume you just did day 16, or were you working on like previous puzzles? Hey, PV93, welcome to the stream. And then I want to return the sum. Day 16. Cool. So did the same as part 1 for part 2. Can't think of a better way. Yeah, how long did it take your code to run for part 2? Because it takes mine like a second, almost a second, and if I search 12,000 different starting points, like I'm worried that my code is going to take 12,000 seconds to run. think this should work. Maybe I have some local variables in here that I'll need to move into the function. Yeah, but now sum doesn't exist here. So I should initialize it at least. It takes 3 seconds for both. That's not bad. What language are you working in? Is it like something low level like C or C++? Dart. Okay. I don't really know anything about Dart. Oh, a different language each day. That's crazy. Web, mobile, object-oriented, class-based, garbage collected with C-style syntax. Okay, it can compile to machine code, so it's compiled. That means it should be faster than like my janky little interpreted language here. Mostly for Flutter. Okay, so does this work as a function? No. NX. I am using syntran. This is my own programming language. It's not very good. I wouldn't recommend playing with it. I'm surprised I got this far. I thought I would get stuck around like day 5, and then advent of code would require something that is just impossible for me to do in this language. So can I just pass NX as arguments, or are there going to be so many arguments that I should just make these global variables? I think it's just the size of the grid. I don't think there's too much else that I need to pass. So we're gonna pass the size here. You can tell this is my own language because I don't really have syntax highlighting. I'm using NeoVim as a text editor. So to get syntax highlighting for my language in NeoVim, I'm telling it to treat my language like Rust because the syntax is sort of close enough to Rust that it's a pretty good match. But it thinks that this is an escaped string. So it thinks that like the string is still continuing here. But that's not how strings work in my language. Like quote backslash quote is just backslash as one character, and that's the end of the string. And if I take out this comment at the end of the line, it thinks like the rest of my program is all inside of that string. So I have to have a comment and then have a quote to like trick the syntax highlighter into thinking that this is the end of the quote. Yeah, that's one of the many reasons that I would not recommend using this language. Okay, so I need some more arguments here. NX is an integer and NY is an integer, and that's the size of the grid. And then grid itself, I'm just going to make that one a global variable because I'm going to have a bad memory leak if I try to pass that as an argument. Is it open source? Yeah. Haven't done an slang yet. What is an slang? So if you go to my GitHub, I'm Jeff Irwin on GitHub. I should have a link in my bio to my website, and you can find my GitHub there if you can't remember how to spell my name. And then the interpreter is called syntran, so this is it. The host language is Fortran, so be warned about that. If you want to play with it, you'll need to have a Fortran compiler. So the README here has directions on how to build it, if you want to do that. I would recommend probably not doing it because there are a bunch of terrible bugs in this. And there are a bunch of important missing features. Oh, you're doing a letter for each language for each letter of the alphabet. What languages are there for est? There's Swift, right? Swift is like a real language. Yeah, so there are instructions here on how to build it. You can use CMake, or there's this thing called the Fortran package manager. You can use that to build it. Wanted to choose Fortran for F, but went with Falcon. I haven't heard of Falcon. There's also, isn't there like F or F sharp? Okay, so I want to make grid a global variable. So I don't want to use let here. And I want to make it a global variable up here. Functional programming is the bane of my existence. Yeah, me too. Like I've looked at Lisp just very briefly, and that's the only functional language that I've played with at all. It's pretty confusing for me. I don't get it. Okay, so initially I don't know the size, so it's going to be 0 by 0 when I declare it, and then down here this will actually allocate it. And I need to fix that in part 2. So this does not use let anymore. Okay, so my function works. It gives me the right answer that's the same as part 1. Now I need to do this for every possible starting point. And the reason I wanted to make this a function is because I'm going to have 4 different loops, maybe 2 different loops. So I'm not just going to call this in one line of code. There are going to be multiple lines of code in different loops that call this, because there's going to be an X loop for like the north-south edges and a Y loop for the east-west edges. Maybe -1. So I need an X loop for the north and south edges. And X is just going to be whatever that is. And then from an X edge, we're going to start going south from the top and start going north from the bottom. So the direction will be south at y equals 0. Don't want to reset that, but then I want to accumulate the max. So I do want to have this initialized. X, Y. And then tiles max equals max, tiles max, tiles. Let's see if I can just get this right so far, and then I have 4 other edges to do, but I'm not ready for that yet. Okay, I think that's actually the answer. We got lucky, and it happened to be on that edge. Yeah, but I have 4 more edges to do. And then why not? So this starts at the north edge and goes south, and then I also want to do the south edge going north. So this is going to be ny minus 1, and the direction will be north. And then that should be 2 out of 4 edges. It thinks Why does it think that's 48 now? Oh, because I only did this once. Okay, and now we have to do the two other edges, east and west. So it's going to be like this loop, except X and Y are going to get swapped everywhere I refer to one of those. At X equals 0, we're going to start going east. And then tiles max equals max, tiles max, tiles. And then the last edge is going to be X equals NX minus 1. And dir equals west. Tiles count. And tiles max. I think that should be it. Okay, we're still getting 51. How many lines of text do I have here? So I have 40 lines of text. We have a 10 by 10 grid, so the perimeter is 40. That makes sense. I've checked all 4 edges. It should check. It should also check the corners in both directions, I think. So let's see what happens with the actual input. Yeah, it's a little slow. We're going to have 12,000 of these. Let me tee this so I can judge the progress. Okay, so now I can see the line number and get a rough idea of how much it has to go. Because it's not 12,000. The size of the grid is 12,000, but the perimeter is only like 400 or 440. So that's not as bad as I thought it would be. It's still going to take a couple minutes at least, but it's not going to take hours. Right, the input is 110 by 110, so the perimeter would be 440. And we're at line 165 out of about 440. There are a couple header lines here, so it's not exactly that far along. And my memory is doing okay. I have a really bad memory leak in syntran where if you pass an array to a function, there's a local copy of that array which never gets deallocated after the function goes out of scope. So I have to be careful about that, but it seems okay. I think we're more than halfway done. So maybe I can do like a regular expression max 7 through 9. Yeah, I think this is the max so far. Because do we have any 73s? Okay, we have a 7-4. So 7-4. I was right, that was the max. And it's done. I've got a good feeling about this. Alright, overall not too bad. Yeah, you just had to be able to handle the splitters, and thanks extensor. Yeah, just handle the splitters and like push something onto a queue or a stack, or do like a depth first search where you have a recursive function to handle the queue or the stack. Yeah, but I think part 2 is not too much harder than part 1. Oh. This thing is on fire. That looks pretty cool. Okay, so I'm gonna commit and push that. And then I think we'll probably find some other channel to raid. Add 2023, day 16. Let's make sure that pushed. There's the commit. And there's the code. Yep, part 1. And part 2. It's kind of a lot of lines of code today. Okay, here's part 2. That was just the function that I used in part 2. Like almost 400 lines. A lot of that was just copied and pasted though, so it didn't feel too bad. All right, let's find somebody to raid. What is happening in the Twitchiverse? Switch out of creator mode. Jonathan Blow's going. He's got 600 viewers. He doesn't need a raid from me. Oh my god, twerk off. Artistic nudity is now legal on Twitch. Oh, let me go back. Where was I? We're like followed channels. Ah, Nan is going. What's she doing? Apex Legends? Alright, well, I don't know how much of an audience overlap I'll have here, but let's give her a raid. Alright, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'll catch you next time. I can't hear anything.
idea. Yeah, but this is the first match? No, you've played before yesterday? No?
Kill though. Still a win.
A win is a win.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you can make us more quiet in the Discord and yourself higher.
Okay.
My audio is usually pretty loud.